The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
The war games may be afoot in Iran. We'll have the latest on that situation in the Middle East. We'll interview a former president of the American Plastic Surgery Association today. Talk to him about the organization's decision to pull back on transgender surgeries for minors. Former President Bill Clinton testifies in the Epstein investigation today. Trump is in Corpus Christi. He's on his way now to Texas to discuss energy and economic policies. We'll have a live report there. And we have 3 members of Congress on the show today to weigh in on all of this breaking news of the day. It is Friday, February 27th. I'm Scott Jennings reporting live for Salem. We're on location today in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm in Memphis to make a speech tonight to the Shelby County Republican Party Lincoln Dinner, and we are broadcasting live at this moment from the historic Peabody Hotel here in downtown Memphis. As I sit here today, a manhunt is on in Memphis for a suspect who shot a police officer on Thursday night. According to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the police say Donnell Jarvis Maxwell, age 40, of Memphis, is wanted for criminal attempted first-degree murder on a police officer. This story I bring to you is another unfortunate reminder of what crime looks like in Democrat-run cities, another reminder of why President Trump has been so adamant about surging federal resources into these cities. On Tuesday night at the State of the Union, the president hailed Memphis as a major success in his continued fight against violent crime. The data bears that out. Last summer, the president deployed the National Guard and several other federal agencies to Memphis, and he created the Memphis Safe Task Force. That included 400 National Guard members, 16 military lawyers to help prosecute cases, and members of law enforcement from the FBI, the ATF, DHS, DEA, and other agencies. And what are the results? To discuss that, sitting next to me, the congressman for the greater Memphis area, David Kustoff of the great state of Tennessee. Congressman, thanks for joining us here on the Scott Jennings Show, and thanks for the invitation to be in Memphis.
Scott, we're really glad to have you in Memphis. It's a great city. This is a great community. You've been welcomed with open arms, and you're in a beautiful setting here in the Peabody Hotel.
We are. This is a historic hotel, a beautiful hotel, and a full hotel today. The what's going on? The Cotton Gin Show?
It's the Farm and Gin Show. This is a big convention that comes to town every year. You have farmers from all over the Southeast, all over the region, who are here, and they get together, and there are vendors, and it's a big deal. So we're glad you're here along with the people who support Americans, our farmers and producers.
Absolutely. Flying into Memphis today on a beautiful day, walking in the door of the Peabody, greeted by a lot of friendly faces here in Memphis. The hospitality has been really nice. Let's talk about Memphis. Let's talk about what President Trump and the governor, Bill Lee, and law enforcement have been able to accomplish here. According to the governor, crime has decreased by 55% since this task force was launched. 5,500 people have been arrested. You represent this area in Congress. What are you hearing from your constituents? Are they happy with the results of the Memphis Safe Task Force and the federal intervention?
Scott, the majority of people in this community, whatever side of the political aisle they're on, whatever part of town they're on, they appreciate President Trump and they appreciate Governor Bill Lee surging these federal and state resources into the community. The number of arrests is significant. It's actually over 6,000. It's 6,400 arrests as of just a couple of days ago. They have arrested over 600 known gang members.
Wow. And
here's an incredible stat, Scott. Since this task force started in September, they've located 148 missing children. That's an incredible number. But again, regardless of who you are, they're appreciative of what President Trump has done, his leadership, bringing this task force to Memphis. There's a good vibe in Memphis.
Yeah.
And people feel safe compared to prior to the task force. And everybody should feel like they can have their children go to school and not have to be concerned about any violence, not being going to the grocery store, to the gas station. A different vibe in Memphis.
So more statistics. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation says that In 2025, crime decreased by nearly 20% year over year, and serious violent crimes like murder, rape, aggravated assault, and robbery dropped nearly 30%. Also, property crimes, burglary, theft, car theft, that was down a little over 28%. So compared that to 2023, before the federal intervention, you have crime down overall in Memphis 41%, violent crime down 30%, murders down 47%, aggravated assaults down 24%. Raw numbers, 66 fewer homicides than in 2024 and 161 fewer than the record high of 2023. There is no doubt that the president engaging this federal intervention, National Guard and other federal law enforcement, this might be the biggest success story, this in Washington, D.C. in the country.
So I think you're exactly right, Scott. And two takeaways from that is, number one, it really does work. And here in Memphis, you've got federal law enforcement, state and local. They work well together.
Yeah.
They're on a common mission to try to scoop up the bad guys and to make people feel safer. The other takeaway is this is a model for how this can work in other cities, big cities, that have experienced a surge in violent crime. Look to Memphis. Look to the successes. If I were a mayor or a governor of a city that had a high rate of violent crime, I would welcome these resources that the president has offered to other cities. But Memphis has done it the right way.
And the local officials here are Democrats and probably had some skepticism at the start, but they're even touting now the safety numbers here in the city. It is a good example of federal and state and local cooperation, and a good example of bipartisan cooperation when people decide to work together. Memphis is a real success story. That voice you're hearing on the show today, by the way, Congressman David Kustoff of Tennessee. Congressman, the other big story of the day, international affairs. Iran, the United States State Department has authorized non-emergency personnel and their family members to leave our embassy in Israel. That message went out just a few hours ago. Several other countries, China, Kazakhstan, Germany, India, South Korea, they are urging their citizens to avoid the area, just reading the tea leaves. It sounds like we may be on a war footing. We're just hearing, as we were going on the air, the president is not happy with the status of negotiations with the Iranian regime. It feels like between what we're hearing from the embassy, what the president said, the military buildup, we may be about to go to war with this Iranian regime. What's your reaction to that?
Well, look, it's very serious. We know that right now, Scott, we have the largest military buildup in that part of the world since 2003. And we know that the president has dispatched Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Marco Rubio to try to work with the Iranian counterparts in good faith. And the Iranians know that if they don't come to the table with some solutions, and be clear, the president Tuesday night at the State of the Union was very firm and very direct that Iran can never possess a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
So if they don't come to terms, I see one of three things happening. One is that we could see a very surgical operation similar to what we saw in June in Iran when we took out the nuclear facility, and similar to what we saw in Venezuela when Maduro was captured. Very, very strategic and very surgical. It could be broader. It could be regime change. But make no mistake, the president is moved by the images and the reports of protesters literally in Iran being killed by the government, and the threat to our national security with Iran possessing nuclear weapons.
Yeah, these protesters who were out in the streets being killed apparently in the tens of thousands. It's just a mass slaughter. The nuclear enrichment is an issue, and also these intercontinental ballistic missiles, the idea that Iran would use these missiles not just to strike Israel, but also to strike other countries, other allies of the United States. So it is a dangerous situation. We'll keep an eye on that on the show today. Congressman Kustoff, thanks for having us here in Memphis, and we're glad to be with you today, and we'll look forward to seeing you tonight.
Thank you, Scott. We're honored to have you broadcast from Memphis. Glad to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And before we take a break, I do want to bring you a listener story. As you know, we're collecting stories from our listeners around the country. This one comes in from Keith in Washington. Really active guy. He was a college athlete, martial arts instructor, Very active, a lot of athletic activity in this man's life, and he did collect some aches and pains, and he didn't know what to do. He turned to Relief Factor. Now, knee pain nearly gone, neck pain dropping significantly, and he was able to keep training, and he earned his black belt. Relief Factor put this man's life back on track. He was having pain. He couldn't do what he wanted to do. He takes Relief Factor. Voila! We're back to work with Keith in Washington. If pain is bothering you, if you'd like to be more active, try out Relief Factor's 3-week quick start. See how it works. Go to relieffactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF. Let's see if we can get you out of pain. Congressman, thanks for being here. One of your colleagues is coming up next. Marlon Stutzman of Indiana joins the show. It's Scott Jennings, Common Sense for the American People. Stay with us.
Hey, it's Scott Jennings. You know, depending on where you live, crime may be skyrocketing, and you may already own a firearm. But before you face the financial, legal, and emotional weight of pulling the trigger, there's a smarter option. It's called Byrna. That's B-Y-R-N-A. Byrna makes a less lethal launcher that fires tear gas and kinetic rounds designed to stop an attacker for up to 40 minutes. That gives you time to escape and call for help without deadly consequences. Their best-selling compact launcher is sleek, slim, and incredibly powerful. It's about the size of a smartphone, and it is ideal for concealed carry. It's comfortable, discreet, and confidence-building. It fires at 400 feet per second with serious stopping power, enough to shut down a threat fast without the legal and moral complexity of lethal force. Byrna is proudly American. Over 80% of the components are U.S. sourced. Every Byrna launcher is hand-assembled in Fort Wayne, Indiana. With over 750,000 of these things sold worldwide, Byrna is best in class. It's legal in all 50 states. No background checks, comes right to your door. Learn more at Byrna.com, Byrna.com.
Straight talk without the bluster. When you positively need the truth, this is where you come. The Scott Jennings Show.
It is Friday, February 27th, broadcasting live from the historic Peabody Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. Scott Jennings here with Common Sense for the American people. We have a lot of breaking news happening all over the world today. To help break it down for us and offer his expert reaction, we have Congressman Marlon Stutzman from Indiana's 3rd Congressional District on the line. Congressman, welcome back to the Scott Jennings Show.
Good afternoon, Scott. Great to be with you.
Yeah, great to hear your voice again, sir, and thanks for your time today. Let's start here. The president traveling to Corpus Christi, Texas today. He's going to talk about energy. He's going to talk about his economic policies. We'll see also if he touches on the issue of housing affordability, which he's been talking about a lot lately. You are also working on the issue of housing affordability. Tell us what you got going on.
Yeah, well, first of all, the American dream is, to buy a home. And what we've seen over the past 5 years because of the Biden-era policies and inflation and interest rates and everything else that's gone on, and that the first-time home buyer used to be the age of 28, and now we're at 40 years old. And so we've really pushed out, the accomplishment of the American dream by 12 years for first-time home buyers, and have made it difficult even for those who want to move from one home to another, much more challenging. And so President Trump actually talked about this in the State of the Union and talked about how he, believes we need to clean up the federal government. We got to get regulations back under control. I had a bill that we passed out of the House that just simply requires HUD and USDA to get on the same page on regulations. We shouldn't be slowing down building because of a government, agency or some bureaucrat that needs a job. We need to make sure that people can build, the permitting process goes quickly, but also, the fact that institutional investors are stepping in front of American families and to buy homes. And this has been a big issue for President Trump and Treasury Secretary Bessent, saying, hey, let's be sure that the American family is first in line to buy a home and that they're not being undercut by institutional investors that have other advantages. And so it's an important balance, but we just need to make sure American families have the first chance to buy a home.
It seems like, Congressman, this is an issue where you might actually see some bipartisan cooperation in Washington. There have been Democrats who've talked about this issue as well. Could this be a moment of unity between the two parties, trying to preserve home buying for families and put the institutional investors at the back of the line?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, they should. President Trump has been leading on this, and we've met with Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, the other day, and you can tell this is an issue that he really feels strongly about. We passed a big housing package out of the House a couple of weeks ago, and there was a strong bipartisan support. So it'll be interesting. I think, even watching the Democrats during the State of the Union, they were on their feet more than they ever wanted to be because President Trump, is doing a remarkable job on getting the economy turned around. Of course, they didn't applaud any of the policy positions outside of, of the things that we're talking about, except for banning members of Congress from trading, insider trading, like Nancy Pelosi has done, and others have taken advantage of. The Democrats, a couple Democrats even stood for that, which I was happy to see. But you know what? President Trump is doing a phenomenal job in getting this country back on track, and it's because he's got instincts that connect with the American people, and he knows how hard it is to get a start and make things happen. And when you're saddled with debt, and whether it's credit card debt or you can't even buy a home because the cost of living is too much, he's looking out for the person that wants to get ahead in life, and that's the Republican message, and I hope Democrats support it.
It's Congressman Marlin Stutzman of Indiana joining us on the show today. Congressman, we've got about 30 seconds left here. I wanted to ask you about what's going on in Chappaqua, New York today. Some of your colleagues from the House Oversight Committee are deposing former President Bill Clinton in the Epstein Files investigation. He, of course, is all over the Epstein Files. They talked to Hillary Clinton yesterday. Any reaction to the interview of the Clintons?
Well, for her especially, I mean, she just, again, deflected everything, and she said that she had no relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, but she's a friend of Gazelle. It's like, how can you be friends with her but not know him? And also, I just think that there's so much they're disingenuous when they explain what it is. And again, President Clinton was the best at explaining what is, and finding his way out of these arguments. So it'll be interesting to see what the final report is, but I'm glad they finally got to be in front of them and ask them the questions that Americans really do care about.
That's Congressman Marlin Stutzman of the great state of Indiana. Thanks for joining us on the show today. We'll check back in with you in the days ahead as we see everything happening, unfolding in the world. We're going to take a break. We'll have more breaking news when we come back. It's Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is in Memphis. Stay with us.
You know something? Universities are kind of a bad deal. 6 figures of debt for a bachelor's degree that signals less every year. 4 years spent navigating ideological rules instead of learning how to think. Grades inflated, standards lowered, dissent punished. We call it higher education, but it's mostly expensive daycare with a credential attached. The University of Austin, also known as UATX, is different, however. Admissions at UATX are based on test scores alone. No essays, no resumes. Nobody cares who your parents know. If you're smart enough, you're in. UATX students turned down UChicago and fled Barnard to complete a demanding great books core, including Aristotle, Shakespeare, de Tocqueville, alongside real math, science, economics, and AI. Classes are small, professors actually know your name, grades aren't padded, excellence is measured and rewarded. From day one, students work directly with top founders, investors, and institutions, building companies, doing serious research, and landing real internships. And here's the part that changes everything. There is no tuition. Thanks to private donors, every UATX student graduates debt-free. You're free to take risks, free to start companies, and free to build a life instead of paying off loans. If you want an empty credential, look elsewhere. If you want a serious education that actually prepares you to lead, apply to the University of Austin. Visit uaustin.org. That's uaustin.org.
Now, for America's favorite pundit, it's Scott Jennings.
Friday, February 27th. We're on location today, broadcasting from Memphis, Tennessee. We're at the historic Peabody Hotel, and the hospitality here could not be better. We're very grateful for the Leadership here at the Peabody and all the folks in Memphis who have welcomed in common sense for the American people to Memphis, Tennessee today. We're going to do a big interview in just a moment with Dr. Scott Glassberg, who is former head of the Plastic Surgeons Association. But first, we do have a little breaking news into the show. Just before departing the White House for Corpus Christi, Texas, President Trump made some comments about what's going on in the Middle East. Based on the tea leaves right now, it appears we may be on a war footing in the next few days. Let's hear from President Trump in cut number 6.
How are the talks going to the problem?
No, I'm not. I'm not happy with the fact that they're not willing to give us what we have to have. So I'm not thrilled with that. We'll see what happens. We're talking later. We'll have some additional talks today. But no, I'm not happy with the way they're going.
President Trump not happy with the Iranian regime and their posture. There have been 3 rounds of talks. The president said there will be more talks today, but non-essential embassy personnel at the U.S. Embassy in Israel has been told it's time to evacuate. Other countries have told their populations to avoid the region. You can do the math on that. We'll pay attention to this throughout the show today. Continuing our coverage today of a massive policy shift happening around transgender surgeries in America. Now, it wasn't that long ago that several major medical groups and institutions supported allowing minors to receive these life-altering surgeries. But in the last few months, something is changing. The president's administration has pressured hospitals around the country to stop these procedures. A woman in New York was awarded $2 million from a jury in a detransition lawsuit. And just in the last month, major organizations like the American Medical Association and the American Society of Plastic Surgeons have taken the position that these procedures should at least wait until adulthood. No more surgeries for minors. Joining us now to discuss these major decisions by these medical groups is Dr. Scott Glassberg. He is the past president of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. Dr. Glassberg, thank you, and welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
Yeah, appreciate your time today, Dr. Glassberg. Tell us, when an organization like the Plastic Surgeons makes a major policy decision, and it is a serious shift in policy like this, what goes into that kind of a decision? Take us inside the internal deliberations that ultimately delivered the statement that minors should not be receiving transgender surgeries.
So this is an iterative process that doesn't just sort of happen with the flip of a switch. We spent several years looking at the data and evidence in this area, specifically on gender-affirming surgery for adolescents and children, and found consistently that that data and evidence was of low quality and low certainty. We started to realize it back in mid-2024, and so initially we came out with a statement speaking just to that point, that the data was of low quality, low certainty. We cautioned our members through an advisory that if they're treating patients in this scenario, that they should be cautious, that it was difficult to establish a positive risk-benefit ratio, and that's what we're all about as surgeons and physicians, is establishing a benefit. But then things continue to evolve. Multiple systematic reviews like the Cass report out of the UK, or a McMaster article that was posted in our journal, the Journal of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, and then finally the HHS report, which came out in November, all confirmed what we sort of already knew, which was that the data and science and evidence were of low quality, low certainty. So for that reason, it was sort of a natural evolution of a viewing of the data to come out with that statement that if we cannot, as surgeons, find a positive risk-benefit ratio, we're all about patient safety and patient well-being, that we should advise that these surgeries should be postponed, recommend, until the age of 19.
Dr. Glassberg, before you made this policy change, obviously in our culture, there was a lot of political pressure on medical organizations and other institutions to continue to do these kinds of procedures. Talk to us a little bit about the cultural and political pressure that existed and how ultimately the organization decided, you know what, the pressure is not right. We're going to really look at the evidence here. You mentioned a couple of the reports that you looked at, but I think a lot of our listeners are interested in this idea that our culture and politics was pushing our medicine in a certain direction that ultimately the data just didn't support.
So a really great question, and one that I've had to address now over the, since we came out with this statement about a month ago. And the reality is the beauty of being a medical and scientific organization, a surgical specialty organization, is that we don't bow to politics. We don't deal with politics. We're politics free. We deal with science and data and evidence. And so, for those that have sort of critiqued and said, oh, this is pressure from the Trump administration or HHS or something, it's simply not true. As I pointed out in my initial statement, we started this iterative process back in 2024 under a different administration with a completely different view of this. And so this had nothing to do with politics. I totally understand, sort of the tense, discussions around this topic and the political atmosphere. But the beauty of what we do is we are free of science. It's all about patient safety and taking care of patients first.
Dr. Glassberg, when the organization decided to make the decision, did you face a lot of internal dissent? Did you have members of the society that simply disagreed? And is there a lot of unhappiness, I guess, or is there pretty well acceptance of what you've done and that it is the right direction for the plastic surgeons?
Well, the positive comments, both from internally and externally, have been overwhelmingly positive. But of course, with such a heated issue, there will be some dissent and a difference of opinions. Not quite dissent, but a difference of opinion. And we acknowledge that. I was chair of a gender surgery task force. And it was the goal there was not policy making. It was to try to build consensus among stakeholders with different views. We were never able to do that. That was a different process than this one. And so, sure, we've had pushback from some of our members, especially those that do this type of surgery. And, I think there's hopefully an understanding that, these things will continue to be discussed and the evidence will continue to be looked at. But right now, where we stand, that's where the evidence is. And again, we are committed to doing what's best for the well-being of our patients.
That voice you're hearing is Dr. Scott Glassberg. He is past president of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. We're talking about the plastic surgeons' recent decision to no longer recommend transgender surgeries for minors, that those surgeries should be put off until at least adulthood. Dr. Glassberg, obviously, you're a practicing physician and you're heavily involved in your organization, and you do deal with policymakers and politicians. How difficult is it in our current political environment to deal with the different layers of government? Obviously, you have the feds, and they have a posture today under the Trump administration, which is different than the Biden posture. You have a hodgepodge of different regulations and rules and political pressures in states and in localities. Talk to us about how you all navigate the different political levers that you come into contact with every single day.
So as I mentioned, we put medical clinical care above all else, and that's what we primarily focus on. But if you read the statement that ASPS put out carefully, we're not for the criminalization of medical care. However, we do caution the members in the statement to be mindful of whether it's a ban or a law in a certain state that might make this care illegal or ban it, to be mindful of those laws. And, those are different, as you know, from each of the different 50 states. About half of them now have bans on this type of care. So we do caution our members, we advise our members to be mindful of what's going on in their states. But again, our focus is primarily on science, evidence, and data. Medical ethics, I should mention as well, is really important in this realm. And coming back to a vulnerable population of children and adolescents, and in terms of surgery, many of which are irreversible, I think that we have to put that above all politics, all pressures. Sure, do we speak to, different facets of government, whether it's the legislature or, the departments? Absolutely. But when push comes to shove, for us, it's all about clinical care and doing what's best for our patients.
Dr. Glassberg, I thought maybe I would just ask you to talk directly to parents for a moment. Obviously, parents are sometimes put in difficult situations. They're getting signals from their children. Their children may be getting signals from other people in their lives that their parents don't know about. They're interacting with different folks. You all have made the decision to say these surgeries should not be done until adulthood. Maybe talk to the parents of America. What would you tell them if their child comes to them and says, hey, I've, for whatever reason, decided I want to do this? How would you advise parents to deal with those conversations right now?
Another great question. I don't do these surgeries, but I know what I would say if I was talking to a parent in this situation. We don't start with the end game. We start at the beginning, right? And we know that a careful psychiatric evaluation, psychological evaluation is critical to understanding what's going on with their children. In terms of pressure, we want to make sure there's no pressure like social media or peer pressure and things like that that could go into the minds of these children and adolescents. And then there's a process that builds before you get to either endocrine or surgical care, which again has right now no scientific basis in this population. There are other ways to go. There are other ways to treat these patients through psychological care. And I would caution parents to do their homework. These are significant treatments, irreversible, and I would say if you're not comfortable, get a second opinion, get a third opinion, speak to a lot of different people, and I would make sure that I was comfortable moving forward, both with what they're going to do, and also with the expertise of the person that they're seeing. Even on other procedures, we talk all the time about only seeing a board-certified plastic surgeon because of their training. That's doubly important here. Same thing is true for whether it's a psychiatrist or an endocrinologist or any other person they might encounter in their discovery of what is going on with their child. And I think there's a lot of empathy that needs to be said. No one is suggesting that these children don't have concerns, issues, that gender dysphoria may not be real in those patients, but I think they need to be guided along a course of what is safe and in the best interest of these children.
That voice you're hearing, Dr. Scott Glassberg, past president of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. Dr. Glassberg, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this huge issue with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. Great seeing you.
Thank you, Scott. Good to talk to you, sir. When we come back, we're going to get back to the story, the breaking news. We may be on a war footing with Iran. I've got an expert on America's posture vis-a-vis Iran coming up next. Stay with us here. Common Sense for the American People on Salem. Stay with us.
You want to drive a leftist crazy? Tell the truth and keep smiling. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Friday, February 27th. On location today in Memphis, Tennessee, broadcasting live from the historic Peabody Hotel. Here's something, by the way, that every parent, every grandparent needs to hear. Kids are being targeted online through gaming platforms, social media, messaging apps. They are not safe, and big tech is not doing enough to protect them. These companies, they profit by screen time and engagement, and often predators slip through the cracks, and it's families that pay the price. Child Help, our friends and partners at Child Help, they run the National Child Abuse Hotline. They hear from children every day who were contacted through these games and apps. These kids are being groomed, manipulated, and threatened by adults who are pretending to be someone else. I'll tell you a quick story. One boy reached out to Child Help's hotline. He was terrified and ashamed. An adult that he met in an online game was demanding photos from this child and threatening to lie to his parents if he did not comply. Reaching out to Child Help, frightened, terrified, that call may well have saved that boy's life. That is why I work with Child Help. That's why I'm their partner. That's why I donate to them personally, and that's why I'm asking you to do the same. I'm only asking for $27. Your donation, $27, fuels one of these calls to the National Child Abuse Hotline. Here's how you do it. childhelp.org/Scott, or text Child Help to 94878. Again, it's just a $27 contribution to Child Help. Scott Jennings is here. Common Sense for the American People. Thanks for joining us here on a Friday. We have a lot of breaking news going on around the world. In the next hour, by the way, we'll get a live report from Corpus Christi, Texas. President Trump on his way there to talk energy, economy, and other issues. We have Congressman Keith Self from Texas, who's with the president. He's hopefully going to be able to call into the show and give us a report on what the president has to say down in Texas. Now, before the president left the White House today, he was asked on the South Lawn about what's going on with Iran. Just to bring you up to speed, the U.S. Embassy in Israel today gave the word to non-essential personnel, now's the time to leave. Other countries are warning their populations, stay away from the region. It appears we may, in the next few days, be on a war footing with Iran as these talks with the regime obviously are not going in a direction the president is happy with. Let's hear from President Trump. This was on the South Lawn just a little while ago in Washington before he departed. Cut number 7.
Your team told you that if you use the military now, that there will be regime change right away?
No, nobody's told me that. You don't know. I mean, nobody knows. There might be and there might not be. It'd be nice if we could do it without, but sometimes you have to do it with. When you looked at we have the greatest military anywhere in the world. There's nothing close. I'd love not to use it, but sometimes you have to.
We'll be tracking this story on Iran throughout the rest of the show today. Another story out of Washington I thought you might be interested in. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon has announced that the Justice Department is suing 5 additional states for failure to produce the voter rolls. She made a comment about this that I want to play for you. This is Harmeet Dillon, Assistant Attorney General, in cut number 1.
Exciting election law news here at the DOJ Civil Rights Division. Today, we sued 5 additional states for their refusal to turn over voter rolls in response to the Attorney General's request under the Civil Rights Act of 1960. Specifically, we sued West Virginia, Utah, Oklahoma, Kentucky, and New Jersey.
That's the Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon. The project here is that the federal government is trying to work with states to clean up voter rolls. They found in a number of states that there are tens or even hundreds of thousands of people on voter rolls who should not be there. People who are phantom registrants, moved away, deceased, what have you, and some states are resisting. So Harmeet Dillon has been quite aggressive at going after these states and filing lawsuits, the federal government trying to get a hold of this data so they can help the states clean up their voter rolls. You're listening to Common Sense for the American People. It's Scott Jennings broadcasting to you on Salem. We are in Memphis, Tennessee today. I was in New York last night on Newsnight with Abby Phillip, got on a plane early this morning and made my way down here to Memphis. Beautiful sunny day in Memphis, Tennessee. We're broadcasting live from the Peabody Hotel, one of the most historic hotels in the southern United States. The hospitality here has been incredible. I'll be making a speech here in Memphis tonight. We are going to take our top-of-the-hour break. We have all the breaking news and updates when we come back. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
If the leftists haven't had enough yet, there's more. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Friday, February 27th. Common Sense for the American People. We're on the road. Memphis, Tennessee is our location today, and we broadcast to you live from the historic Peabody Hotel here in Memphis. And we're glad to be here. Everyone is extremely friendly. It's a beautiful day in Memphis, Tennessee. Quick check of the headlines for you. Attorney General Pam Bondi, and this is just in to the Scott Jennings Show. Attorney General Bondi has announced that the Justice Department has unsealed an indictment charging 30 more people who took part in the attack on the city's church in Minnesota a few weeks ago. Federal agents, Attorney General Bondi says, have already arrested 25 of the 30. They have been indicted on the FACE Act and on the Klan Act. This is the attack on the church that involved Don Lemon, who was previously indicted by a grand jury. President Clinton, former President Clinton, is being deposed by the House Oversight Committee in Chappaqua, New York today. The chairman of the House Oversight Committee is Jamie Comer of Kentucky. He briefed the media. Here's clip number 3.
For these depositions of great power and great wealth, and I used yesterday and today as an example, it took 7 months to get the Clintons in here. But we've got them in here, and we look forward to asking lots of questions that I think any curious media outlet in America would have. Yesterday, Ms. Clinton deferred a lot of questions to her husband today. There were at least a dozen times when she said, "You'll have to ask my husband that. I can't answer that." So We already had a big portfolio of questions for him,
not sorry.
and that increased yesterday. So we look forward to that. We'll be happy to answer a couple of questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Chad.
Mr. Chairman, good morning.
And the current president, Donald Trump, is on his way to Texas right now, and he's going to have an event today regarding energy and economic policies. Before he left the White House in Washington, he was asked about the situation with Iran. It does appear the United States is moving towards a war footing with Iran. Here's the president in cut number 6.
How are the talks going the problem?
No, I'm not. I'm not happy with the fact that they're not willing to give us what we have to have. So I'm not thrilled with that. We'll see what happens. We're talking later. We'll have some additional talks today. But no, I'm not happy with the way they're going.
After the president said he wasn't happy with the Iranian regime, not happy with the direction of the talks, he boarded Air Force One, and he's on his way to Corpus Christi, Texas. And that's where we go now. Kicking off this hour of the Scott Jennings Show, we're joined live by Congressman Keith Self, who is in Corpus Christi, waiting for the president to arrive. Congressman, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Delighted to be here, Scott. Thank you.
And good to see you Saturday down in Collin County, sir. We had a great event there together, and glad you were able to join us here. What are you expecting the president to do and say in Corpus Christi today?
Well, he's come to the dynamic state of Texas to make his case that the economy is moving again. The economy has got great things happening. We just saw the mortgage rates drop below 6%. So he's going to be making the case that Trump economy is moving, and we need to be watching it carefully because the midterms will revolve on the economy. And I think between now and then, we're going to see great movement, and people are going to be very pleased with where they stand on their personal economy.
Congressman Self, my understanding is there could be some announcements today on LNG, liquid natural gas, at this event. What are you expecting to hear on this critical energy issue?
Well, we already produce more oil and more gas than anybody else in the world. In fact, 2 and 3 combined in some cases. So if we've got more agreements, the baby drill is working. And if we have an agreement that he's going to announce, it's only going to exacerbate, it's only going to speed up the fact that American energy dominance rules the world.
And as you mentioned, the midterms, you do have a primary coming up in Texas. That is March the 3rd. You have 3 people running for the United States Senate. Are you expecting Senator Cornyn and his 2 opponents to be there today? And are you expecting the president to make any announcement on politics in Texas today?
Well, I know that 2 of them are going to be here because I've seen and heard that. I don't know if all 3 will be here. I'll leave the names to them to announce. But yeah, I would expect all 3 of them to be here because this is President Trump and their stomping grounds. Look, it's right around the corner. Tuesday is election day. Most people don't have this early of a primary, but it is upon us. So they're going to make their cases for the last time in the next couple of days.
Yeah, it's hot and heavy down there in Texas. We'll be paying attention to that on the show. Let me bring up another issue that you've been working on in the House, Congressman Self, and that is part of this movement in the House Republican Conference to ban Sharia law nationally. Can you talk to us about this effort and why it's so important that this happens this year?
Oh, my goodness, absolutely. Look, we started the Sharia-Free America Caucus after the White House Christmas party, a conversation with Senator Tuberville from Alabama. We already have 45 members of the House of Representatives joined the caucus representing 22 states. That's almost half of the states in America. And frankly, that's in 2 months' time. It's important because, look, Sharia law is what governs Islam. And it is moving fast. I represent ground zero in North Texas, ground zero. The mosques are being built fast. We're moving past the accommodation phase into the intimidation phase in some cases. And this is a dominant political ideology that will not be an alternative political ideology. It will supplant the U.S. Constitution and our laws. Our laws are based on personal responsibility, personal freedom, the individual. Sharia is based totally on submission to Islam. And they intend to do that. Look at the 57 countries around the world that are dominated by Sharia law and Islam. You'll see what we do not want in America today.
Congressman Keith Self is from Texas. He's our special guest here on the Scott Jennings Show. Congressman, our thoughts are with all the deployed military servicemen and women who are now in the Middle East. And as we heard at the top of the show, it may be that we're moving towards a war footing with Iran. You are a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. You had a 25-year career of service to our nation. You were deployed all over the world. What's going through your mind as a career military officer as you watch this military buildup and you watch our nation possibly move toward attacking the Iranian regime?
Well, first of all, we've got a huge military force in the Middle East. We've got one carrier stationed off of Israel, one stationed in the Gulf. That's offense, defense. We've got a tremendous force there. Now, the two priorities for the Islamic regime in Iran are regime survival first and their nuclear program second. And from what I'm hearing, they are not answering President Trump's demand that they at least give up their nuclear program if they will not have regime change. So they may have to undergo both. What I do not want is an extended war in the Middle East. We do not want another forever war in the Middle East. I don't think the American people would put up with it. And we certainly don't need to send our young men and women in harm's way again over an extended period of time. So if we do it, I hope it is a massive strike, but let's don't get bogged down in yet another Middle Eastern country.
That's Congressman Keith Self from the great state of Texas. He is in Corpus Christi, and he is waiting on President Trump to arrive in Texas. The president is having a big event today. Congressman, I know you said you were waiting for the president out there in the parking lot. I assume the crowds are large and already gathering.
Oh, my goodness, the lines to get into it are already huge. Oh, my goodness, yes. The parking lot is full, and it is a huge parking lot. Going to be a big event. Sure looks like it to me.
All right, Congressman Self, thanks for joining us on the Scott Jennings Show. Honored to have you, sir.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, that was Congressman Keith Self of Texas, a military hero and now member of the United States Congress. A quick word from our friends at Relief Factor, and in fact, I'll keep it in Texas because I've got a letter here from Tom in Texas, 85-year-old Tom. He told me that pain was keeping him from riding his bike and flying small aircraft as a flight instructor, but after taking Relief Factor, lower back pain and hip pain are virtually gone, and he even had a long-standing trigger finger issue that started to improve. Yet another person who has written us to tell us that Relief Factor materially changed the quality of their life. We are using Relief Factor in the Jennings household. Just was texting with my father. He's on his way back on a little road trip back from Florida, back towards Kentucky today, but he's been playing a lot of golf. He's been taking Relief Factor, and he's doing all the things in his retirement that he wants to do, and he's doing them pain-free. Relief Factor helps keep everyday aches and pains from turning into something bigger, and it allows you to stay focused on your job, on your hobbies, on your life. If pain is holding you back, try Relief Factor. They have a 3-week quick start. That's what you want to do. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or visit relieffactor.com. And when we come back, we will have the Relief Factor Pain of the Week. Who will it be? Stay tuned to find out. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
Common sense for the American people. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
And it is Common Sense for the American people, coming to you on location live from Memphis, Tennessee, broadcasting here from the historic Peabody Hotel. And it is Friday afternoon on the Scott Jennings Show, which means it is time for the Relief Factor Political Pain of the Week.
And now, the Relief Factor Pain of the Week. Ooh.
Every week, we are going to highlight the person, politician, organization, or whoever that is causing me political pain. And this week, the pain wasn't something that happened to me personally. It was something that happened to the entire country. It happened to all of you as well, something that millions of Americans watched in real time during the State of the Union address. On Tuesday night, the country watched as Democrats, well, the few that did not boycott the president's speech, they watched Democrats refusing to stand, refusing to applaud, refusing to even acknowledge moments that weren't even political at all, moments that were about courage, moments that were about loss, moments that were about who we are as Americans. And it was painful to watch, because standing and applauding doesn't mean you have to agree with every policy of the president. It doesn't mean you're surrendering your beliefs. It just means that sometimes you can recognize that something bigger than yourself or your own politics is going on. Some of these Democrats refuse to stand for angel families, families that have faced unimaginable loss. They couldn't even acknowledge their pain. Families that have lost loved ones to illegal immigrant violent criminals. Some of the Democrats refuse to stand for the mother of Irina Zarutska, the young Ukrainian woman who was murdered on the train in Charlotte, North Carolina. They refuse to applaud a grieving mother who has no political cause, who was simply there because she had lost her 23-year-old daughter. Some Democrats refuse to stand for Erica Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk. Can't we just be more kind to a widow? Wondered Senator John Fetterman the day after he watched his Democratic colleagues sit on their hands. Well, I agree, Senator, but that's just not what Democrats do anymore. Some Democrats even sat through Donald Trump, our commander-in-chief, honoring our nation's military heroes with the Medal of Honor. But perhaps the most telling moment of the night was when the president offered up a simple option for every member of Congress. Let's revisit that moment from Tuesday night in cut number 8.
One of the great things about the State of the Union is how it gives Americans the chance to see clearly what their representatives really believe. So tonight I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. Isn't that a shame? You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Now, if you were watching the speech, what you saw there was Republicans standing up and giving the president lengthy applause, affirming that their highest allegiance is to the American people, affirming their highest duty is to protect the American people. Every Democrat in the chamber sat in silence. Their refusal to stand in that moment made clear the distinction between the two parties right now. Republicans are working to solve problems of crime, immigration, international conflicts, economic problems. They're trying to better the lives of Americans. And today's Democrats, well, they couldn't even find it in their hearts to openly support American citizens over illegal immigrants and criminals. Policy differences, political disagreements, they're standard in our country. But one party has made it clear they cannot put those differences aside anymore to honor the American people. And that, my friends, is painful to watch. And that is why the Democrats who wouldn't stand up in Washington are my Relief Factor Pain of the Week.
That's the Relief Factor Pain of the Week. Scott Jennings, a real pain in the agenda for the lefties.
If you are dealing with pain of any kind, you can deal with it with Relief Factor's 3-week quick start. See how it works for you. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or visit relieffactor.com. It can make a difference. We're getting letters from all over the country, customers of Relief Factor telling us it has changed their life. One more thing, by the way. The cruise is still coming. November, Gallagher and I going out on the high seas on a luxury ship. If you want to get your cabin, do it now. Text the word cruise to 94878. We'd love to see you out there in November of this year. After the break, Friday Punditry is here. Larry O'Connor is my special guest. Stay with us on The Scott Jennings Show.
Ready for more common sense? Here's CNN's senior political commentator, New York Times best-selling author, and America's favorite political pundit, Scott Jennings.
All right, Friday, February 27th, and you know what that means. It's time for Friday Punditry here on The Scott Jennings Show. Joining me is my good friend Larry O'Connor. Larry is the editor at townhall.com. He's a talk radio show host in Washington, D.C. Larry, welcome in to the Scott Jennings Show.
Thanks, Scott, for having me. It seems only fair because my town hall show every day, I feature, you're about half of my show featuring your great work all day long. So time to return the favor.
Well, we're glad to have you and grateful for your support and grateful for your friendship. And we have a lot of breaking news to talk about today, Larry. A lot of things have gone on in the world of politics this week. Let's start with actually breaking news that happened just in the last hour. The Department of Justice, through the Attorney General, has announced that 30 more people in Minnesota have been indicted in the city's church attack. This was the attack that involved Don Lemon. They have arrested 25 of the 30. They were indicted on various violations of the FACE Act and the Klan Act. Larry, how does this strike you, the DOJ staying on top of this church attack in Minnesota? Personally, I love it because I think if you don't crack down on these things, it's going to happen all over the country.
I'm incredibly satisfied by this. This was the turning point, I think, in the narrative where the left sort of overplayed their hand there in Minneapolis. I think that they had the media on their side. And then even this was a bridge too far for most people observing the events there with ICE's activities there and enforcing our laws, intruding on worshipers in the middle of a Sunday service, intimidating them. As Don Lemon said, making them feel uneasy, uncomfortable, and intimidated. That's absolutely a bridge too far. And the best part of this from the DOJ is that they're using the FACE Act, which, of course, was employed to imprison elderly women in D.C. who were praying the rosary out in front of an abortion mill. Those women got locked up, women in their 70s, under the guise of the FACE Act. But what most people don't know is that part of the FACE Act is also you can't intrude upon and intimidate people at their places of worship. That's exactly what this is, and it's sweet justice, Scott.
Yeah, on top of this, we are also learning that Don Lemon, who was already criminally indicted, is now being sued. He's being sued by one of the parishioners for his role. Just reading from the New York Post here, a churchgoer has slapped activist news commentator Don Lemon with a civil suit for his involvement in the anti-ICE mob that stormed the Minnesota church. He was arrested in Los Angeles, but now is also facing a civil suit. When you look at Don Lemon in this situation, Larry, and you see all the things he has said in the wake of this claim that he is just some mere humble journalist who's roaming around covering the news, but when you listen to everything he says in the aftermath and leading up to the attack, this is not journalism. What do you think?
That's not journalism. The First Amendment was never designed to protect people from doing what Don Lemon did. It was 100% premeditated. And honestly, despite the real ramifications of the criminal charges, I think it might be these civil lawsuits. Hopefully this isn't the first one, or the last one, I should say. Every single church member should sue Don Lemon. It would absolutely cripple him. Let me put it in perspective. Imagine if Don Lemon had been embedded with MS-13 gang members who were going into a private home and kidnapping every person in there and intimidating them with physical violence. Would he, and he was part of the planning process, knew about it ahead of time, participated in it, and live streamed the whole thing. Would anyone say that he was just, protected by the First Amendment and doing journalism? Or would they say that he was part and parcel to that crime and supported the criminals? It's obvious that this is a criminal act.
Yeah, it seems like there is this weird thing going on the left where they have decided that if you're carrying a camera or just carrying your cell phone with a camera on it, that somehow gives you this mystical layer of protection from federal laws. Like if I go and as long as I'm carrying a cell phone, I can interfere with federal law enforcement who are engaging in a law enforcement activity. As long as I've got a camera, I can kick open the door of your church and terrorize your parishioners. And then afterwards, hey, First Amendment, I'm just filming. This is a public service announcement from Larry and Scott to the world. Carrying a phone and carrying a camera does not give you immunity from breaking federal laws.
Thank you. And by the way, Scott, it's pretty rich from my perspective. I got started in this business with Andrew Breitbart in 2009 when he started his websites, Big Hollywood, Big Government, that eventually became Breitbart News. One of the big stories we had in 2009 was this young kid named James O'Keefe, who had an undercover video expose on Acorn. People might remember this story in your audience. I know I do. They attacked O'Keefe. They attacked Breitbart. They said this isn't real journalism. It was the kind of 60 Minutes undercover investigative journalism that Mike Wallace was known for decades. But back then, these very same people who are now claiming they can go anywhere and break any laws as long as they've got a smartphone live streaming it were attacking us for not conducting actual journalism back then. Boy, oh boy, how things have changed over the years.
Yeah, how the tables have turned, or as Michael Scott would say, how the turntables. Let's go back Tuesday to the state of the let's go back Tuesday to the State of the Union. I'll just get your reaction. Watching the president, the longest State of the Union in history, after you turned it off and thought about it, what was your gut telling you, Larry?
Scott, I do a morning radio show in D.C., so I got to be up around 4 a.m. So my gut was telling me, come on, man, let's wrap this up. But
I get it.
That said, the amount of political showmanship that he displayed there, nobody does it better. And it was, let me say this. Everybody, because of course his critics on the left and many of your colleagues on cable news, sadly, jumped up and said this was divisive. It was actually the opposite. If you think about it, Scott, the president went out of his way to offer Democrats opportunities to unite around things that 80% or more of Americans all agree on. He kept floating these things that we could all get together and bond and unify around. It was the Democrats who refused to do it. They refused to stand and applaud and get excited about basic American principles and ideas that we should all unite around. So if anything, the president, I think, is guilty of being too much of a unifier. It was the Democrats who refused to play along.
As a political tactical matter, I couldn't help but notice that the president basically stayed on his script all night long. It's very unusual for him to do that, but he basically kept it between the contours of the written speech. He kept it between the navigational beacons. And was quite disciplined in his messaging. Let me zoom in on a couple of Democratic reactions. As you mentioned, most of the Democrats, all of them really wouldn't stand up for basic things, but a couple of them stood out to me, and I think the split screen worked very well for Trump. You had Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, Congresswoman from Michigan, chanting KKK while everyone else in the chamber was chanting USA. How outrageous was that moment?
Yep. Despicable. Absolutely despicable, and indicative of, I think, where the power center for the Democrat Party is right now, Scott. I mean, the Chuck Schumers of the world and the Keith Jeffries will, wave this off, or some of the political pundits on television will wave this off and say, well, she's just the extreme. She's just, the far off left. But she isn't really. She's one of the top fundraisers nationwide for members of Congress who are running, or for new candidates who are trying to turn red districts blue or purple districts blue. She's one of the squad. She's one of the stars. And yes, as everyone else was chanting USA to celebrate our gold medal hockey team, she equates our nation, our United States of America, with the Klan, which is also kind of ironic because, as you have most recently noted, the KKK is a Democrat Party institution.
Yeah, absolutely. Democrats conveniently forget their party's history. By the way, I find it incredible that this Don Lemon mob that invaded that church, some of them are being indicted apparently for violations of the Klan Act, which was passed in the 1870s to fight the Ku Klux Klan, which was, of course, an outgrowth of the Democratic Party. And now you have Don Lemon and his band falling victim to the Klan Act. It's a bit of a delicious irony. One more thing on the Democrats.
I had not seen that detail. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. It's the FACE Act and the Klan Act. All right, one more thing on the Democrats around the State of the Union. Some of them boycotted, and they had alternative events. And if you look at the video, you had Democrats up on stage with people dressed in frog costumes. There was a man in a giraffe costume. There were furries. Larry, my question, why has the left gotten so weird? Why are they dressing up in weird costumes? What do they believe this is of some appeal to the American people?
I guess, or at least to their base. I don't know. I mean, it's funny. They ran for a while there that they were the ones who were the grown-ups in the room and the mature ones, the adults. They're going to bring back the norms. And if this is their idea of the norms, include me out. My friend Selena Zito, a great writer over at Washington Examiner, had a perfect article about this, which is, you remember that moment when Trump turned to the Democrats and said, you people are crazy. That's the narrative. That's the message that Democrats should fear the most in these midterms, Scott, because most Americans looking at that behavior, I mean, let's face it, elections are always a choice, a binary choice. You want to be on this team, you want to be on that team. Who wants to be on the giraffe, furry, and inflatable frog costume team? Not me.
Yeah, it's very strange. And, I think that there's going to be a cohort of voters in this election who are moderately disapproving of what's going on in the country on this issue or that. But that doesn't mean they're going to turn back to the Democrats, because I think Trump is right. They're going to look at these crowds and say, I don't want to be affiliated with people who are simply acting crazy and who, by the way, continue to die on the 20 of every 80-20 issue in America. All right, we got about a minute to go here, Larry. It's that time with our Friday punditry that we pick the winner and loser of the week. You pick the winner, I pick the loser. Who won the week in American politics? Larry O'Connor.
Well, listen, there were a lot to choose from, and it would have been easy to say President Trump with his State of the Union, but I'm going to go a little outside the box. Congresswoman Kat Cammack of Florida positioned herself down in the front row of the speech, dead center, looked like she was right on the Democrat border there. She kept standing up, and you could not miss her. All eyes were on her, and she got a great attention drawn to her, and also, even better, highlighting the fact that everyone around her, the Democrats, refused to stand up. It was such a glaring example of what was wrong with the Democrats in that room, and Kat Cammack, because of that brilliant move, positioning herself there, she's the political winner of the week.
That's a great pick. I love Kat Cammack. I know her a little bit. Jared, make a note. We got to get Kat in here pretty soon, because she is a hoot, by the way, to
she's the
talk
best.
to. All right. She's really, really good. Strong conservative. Loser of the week for me, just based on the breaking news today, I'm going with the Ayatollah. I think he may have overplayed his hand here. It sounds like the president is not happy. And when you've got all this armada and aircraft carriers and the U.S. military bearing down on you, he made some stupid decisions, it sounds like. We'll see what happens in the next few days. The Ayatollah is the loser of the week. Our pundit of the week is Larry O'Connor, editor of townhall.com. Larry, you're awesome. Thank you for everything, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Scott. Right back at you.
More to come on the Scott Jennings Show. Stay with us.
Fighting the left with the best weapon we have, common sense. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
All right, home stretch here on Friday, February 27th. Scott Jennings on location. Memphis, Tennessee is the city today, and we're broadcasting live from the historic Peabody Hotel. A little breaking news into the show. Jamie Comer, the head of the House Oversight Committee, has just talked to the press about the deposition with Bill Clinton today. Apparently, Bill Clinton testified under oath that he didn't have any reason to believe that President Trump had ever been involved with anything problematic involving Jeffrey Epstein. So you have Clinton saying nothing to fear for Donald Trump in all of this, even as Democrats out there try to falsely smear the president on this. Also today, the Department of Justice has announced that an additional 30 people have been indicted in this attack on the city's church in Minneapolis. That's a total of 39 altogether that have been indicted, and at this point, 35 of them are actually under arrest. So the Department of Justice continuing to follow up on the Don Lemon attack on the church in Minneapolis. And we have the issue of Iran going on right now. My next guest is here to discuss the latest breaking news on whether we're going to war with Iran. His name is Behnam Ben Taleblu from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's a foremost Iran expert in our public policy sphere. Behnam, welcome back to the Scott Jennings Show. You've seen what the embassies are doing. You've heard what the president has said. He's not happy. What say you? Are we headed for war with Iran?
Well, great to be with you. The balance certainly looks like that. I haven't really changed my odds. I still think 20% chance of a deal and dropping significantly, but 70% chance of a strike and growing significantly, and less likely is just 10% stasis, limp along, and containment. But the president certainly means what it says, and if the Islamic Republic, as it is looking like in 2026, is borrowing a page from its own diplomatic playbook in 2025 and trying to run the clock, well, they're going to run into the president and the military of the foremost army in the world, because the president gave them 2 months and they dragged their feet, and then we had the 12-day war in 2025, and he gave them here now 10 to 15 days, and he seems unhappy. And so the logistical things to get the U.S. in the position for a strike, and hopefully maybe more of a campaign than a one-off operation in the region, are happening right now. There's major base hardening, there's embassies drawing down, and there's assets moving into theater.
So I wanted to ask you about the embassies. We've seen the U.S. Embassy in Israel telling non-essential personnel maybe time to leave. Other countries are emptying out their embassies in Tehran. Countries are telling their populations, don't go to the region, it's not safe. Does this tell you that the United States is essentially telling our allies around the world, hey, we're on the brink of war?
I don't know if on the brink, but we're certainly getting close. There are negotiations again scheduled for next week in Vienna, in the Austrian capital. That'll be at the same time as the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors meeting. It'll be interesting to see if there's more pressure or talk of talks on the sidelines of those meetings. But again, the president has put the knife near the neck of the Islamic Republic, and he's sharpening it. He would love nothing more than to not have to pull the trigger. He would love it if they actually did concede, but I think based on what we're seeing the Iranians doing, and what we're seeing and hearing the Iranians saying, they think they can get through another limited conflict, and they feel like concessions at this point are more dangerous than military strikes.
There was some reporting this week, Benham, that the American government, people inside the White House, thought perhaps it might be best if our ally Israel were to launch the actual first strikes against Iran. Seems like we'll be working together with Israel if a war breaks out here. Do you agree with that? Should Israel take the lead on initial military operations?
Well, the funny thing is Israel has been much quieter in 2026. You know, you compare what the Israeli prime minister has said to what the American president has said, it's been considerably less. Even when talking about the missile threat, the president has been the one, even from the pulpit at the State of the Union, let alone on social media, really driving the train. And the forcing function, indeed, for why the trigger might be pulled this year actually has to do with those protests. The president himself, not once, not twice, 9 times, drew a red line in the month of January and promised help to Iranian protesters. So I think there's no doubt that I think Israel will be involved at some point, even if it doesn't want to, because it's likely the Islamic Republic will fire missiles at it anyway. But at this point in time, I think it's better for Uncle Sam to go in, take out the strategic systems and clear the way, and then perhaps Israel pick apart the security services and what's left of the military apparatus. But who knows what's being planned behind the scenes? The president could envision a joint operation. It could be a division of labor.
That's Benham Ben Talablu from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, one of our experts we bring on here to discuss the Middle East. Benham, thanks for your time today. We'll check back with you in the next few days, depending on what happens. We're going to wrap up the show here from Memphis. We're at the Peabody Hotel. Thanks to everyone here for making the show a great success. We'll be back in our nation's capital on Monday. It's Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is out. Have a great weekend.